good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is the world according to Herodotus, 450 years BC. There's Libya on the bottom left, let's not talk about that. There's Saudi, let's not talk about that. There's Persia, better not talk about that. There's India, which is great because we civilized it. China isn't there because, as we all know, like Japan, it made absolutely no contribution to civilization in the last 3,000 years. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. We could talk about ISIS. We could talk about what's false and really what happened, and how the media makes it look more sentimental than it really was. Could talk about Russia. We could talk about how China and Japan get along so well nowadays. And we could talk about cybersecurity. Yes, we can. We could also talk about mobile ATMs and payment systems generally, rather important in developing countries. And down home in flooded Sheffield and lots of Britain, we could use some 3D printed flood defense systems. And perhaps most relevantly for you, we could talk about robots in retailing. They are active in Amazon warehouses. They're just becoming active in Lowe's hardware store in America. You can see that this is a very sophisticated robot. If you show it a screw, it will tell you that's on the 4th aisle, sir, if you want another one. Not much more than that. And we could also talk, couldn't we, about the VW event. Just before anybody rushes to throw the usual mud at capitalist corporations, and I'm going to tell you I make my points all today from the left, more left than you would like. Before we rush to throw mud at Volkswagen Paintsicki, let's be clear that the line of causality is overzealous regulation, especially on environmental matters, overzealous marketing people obeying that regulation, and then you get I know nothing at the top. But it's not all just greed and larceny in the usual left-wing account. So we could talk about all of those things, and Joseph has already mentioned cybersecurity. And I'm not going to talk about them, you'll be pleased to hear. I'd much rather, when we're talking about cars, talk about Japan's automatic parking systems, which are a bit more realistic and near-term than hacking fleet. But I'm not going to talk about that. Nor am I even going to talk about the Japanese M&A offensive at the moment and the Chinese M&A offensive, especially in Europe. The fact that China is not only building new nuclear power stations in this country, but is bidding for HS2, has tied up with Imperial College in Birmingham and other people to study new kinds of rolling stock, bought France's 4th largest airport, and it's more and more active, ladies and gentlemen, the leitmotif of my speech, in R&D. If you think they're all imitating, forget it. That day has passed. So we could talk about that, and I hope you're tracking it, and I hope all you engineers are building up folders and files on Chinese FDI, foreign direct investment, especially the R&D component. You'll be looking for allies, you'll be looking for opponents, you'll be looking for new technologies there. Well, one of the words I hear far too much of, I heard it a bit last night at the dinner table, is disruption. I don't buy it, and I ask you not to buy it. If you take the actual term, it was coined by Clayton Christensen in 1997 in his important and a very good book, relatively speaking, The Innovate. Would everybody like to cough at the same time? And if you look at what he says, he's not talking about transformational technologies. You know, who would not want to be disruptive in the IT world now? You know, nobody wants to say, hi, I'm a really incremental kind of guy. You don't get that, right? You've got to be disruptive. But if you look at what he said it's disrupting of markets. It's when an inkjet printer comes along and challenges a laser printer at a lower level of technology, which is just good enough. And he said the same in the innovator solution. And he made 2 mistakes. One was to want innovation to be more predictable. And as Einstein said, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. You can't predict innovation. It's in the nature of innovation that you can't predict it. And second of all, he, while properly praising new entrants, said that good enough technology was good enough. I don't buy it, and especially in 2015, I urge upon you, let's have the best, the most ambitious. Might be hard to maintain in developing countries, that's another issue. But we need the best, not just the adequate. So I'm pretty grumpy about that whole perspective of lowering horizons in IT and innovation generally. And let me make another point before we go any further. Innovation cannot be reduced to IT. If you're serious about the Internet of Things, you better know about the things. We'll come to that a bit more. Well, there's a lot of innovation still happening, even in the West. There's aquaponics. This is in the Netherlands. It's coming to Newham, Beckton, the old base of the National Front. Some of them are the kind of fish in there now, melted down. And there's some really good news, except it could be 30 years away, from Klaus Lackner, who was at Columbia University. He's making these kinds of plastic trees which will suck up the CO2 that Britain's Victorian industrialisation created in the atmosphere. Not carbon capture and storage at power stations, which is to do with flows of CO2, but carbon capture, atmospheric capture, air capture from the atmosphere, which is to do with stocks of CO2. So, of course, we all want to be sustainable, sustainable, except me, I want to be unsustainable. But I put it to you that technological ingenuity, not breastfeeding, can beat the challenge of climate change that Regina already mentioned quite properly. There is climate change, it's anthropogenic, but we made it, therefore we can unmake it. So there is this change happening gradually. There's a low-cost Mangalyaan Indian satellite round Mars. It goes at about 9 rupees per kilometre. If you get in a rickshaw in downtown Delhi, it's about 12 rupees per kilometre. So this is pretty good going. But I'm bound to say that reports of everything being intelligent in IT, especially from a company I won't name, are overblown. And if I hear the example of Watson, the computer that won a quiz show, now that's really intelligent, isn't it, to win a quiz show? You can see the kind of questions that they're asking here. Who is Stoker? Who is Bram Stoker? Well, if you don't know the answer to that, especially if you're from Hungary, Joseph, you'd be in trouble. But the simple question I have to ask is, you know, it won the competition, did it know that it had won? And once you start thinking about that, you'll start not saying intelligent or smart every other word any more than you do sustainable. Because it didn't know that it won. And it won't know for a very long time, if ever. So when we're all raving about disruption and how everything's faster than ever before, and you're going to see a film shortly, I fear, that says it's all faster than ever before, I say, get a grip. Because we're pulling out of a lot of stuff that could do us a lot of favours. Here's Jeffrey Immelt. You know, I prefer him in his hippie days. I kind of like to trace people, you know, the Hello Magazine approach, really. If you think it's all very fast, then take a look at this. This is energy efficiencies. Wish we could get the focus better, but no worries. From 1975 to 2015, they moved up a bit, you know, from 4 or 5 to 25, and now we're going up to, for photovoltaic panels, for 48. This is in the lab, folks. It's not in the real world where the bird shit hits you and all of that. Okay? The one to watch is perovskites. They are going up quite quick, but they don't work in the air just yet. But actually, the pace of development is enormously slow. Right? And even in IT, and this is strongly related to IT, it's slow. How many miles of new major roads has Britain built per year in the last 10 years? Would everybody like to tell me? Motorways and main roads per year? 10. Right. Of course, we're totally overbuilt with roads, right? I mean, we're totally overrun with concrete in Britain, but right now we're doing that. What was the increase in miles per gallon between 1975 and roughly now in the American typical passenger car? 75 to 2015, in my book, that's 40 years. It's gone from about 22 miles a gallon to about 35 miles a gallon in 40 years. America did that. We know that robots are getting smaller, they're getting better, especially if they're made in Germany, and they can even kick you in your solar plexus and you'll live. That's progress. And they're precision tools as well. Well, we could talk about sex bots, and if you can spell my name, you'll find a big article just out on sex bots. Bring them on, I say, but they're not happening. They're just not happening, and robots aren't happening. The number of robots sold around the world, 225,000, is just about equal to the number per year, equal to the number of new jobs created per month by the sclerotic Obama administration in America. So if you think they're really going after your job, they're not. An employer might be going after your job, not Fujitsu. But robots are not going anywhere fast enough. And if you don't believe me, take a look at the unemployment statistics, which I say from the left. Right? They're better than ever in America. It's at a 7-year low, 5.1%. So where are the robots, ladies and gentlemen? Where's the IT taking 47% of American jobs, as the Oxford Martin Institute predicted, and is repeatedly re-predicted all the time? It's just not happening. No investment. No investment. Not enough investment. We're getting some of the Japanese disease. Now, on all of this upbeat note, let me say there are some nice trends in continuity that I like. This is some scuba diving for fishing off the island of, just off the southwest of South Korea. You can see they're pretty heavy hitters doing, and in fact they're all women. And this one's 89. So what Regina said about demographic trends, I know you engineers, you do have sex lives, but you don't think about demography nearly so much. You missed that one. But you need to be, right? Because it's a dominating fact, and we've got a problem in nuclear in Britain because we're losing a generation of older engineers who can't do it. So please address and think about demographic problems, not just as poor old people, but also as more and more older workers. So do think about that. What and how can we aid more old people to work better? Because they're better Googlers, they know where to look. Don't buy all that younger generation, they know everything stuff. They don't. They don't know what a book is, too many of them. And they don't read it from cover to cover, because if I tell them to do so, it's a really fascist gesture. Do me a favour, don't indulge them, be tough on them. That way they can help. But older people, older workers are going to be more important. We see a lot of it in Britain. So, anyway, the point of all these jokes is to say that human ingenuity at a high level of ambition, and not just good enough technology, is the way forward. We've got the carbon extraction technology in the lab, still take a long time to develop. If you look at this guy, who's had a lot to do with the Simpsons, he makes exactly the right point about Hurricane Katrina. It wasn't a natural, God-given, Gaia-given expression of climate change and how we're all to blame. It was a lot more to do with the fact that there were not enough good Fujitsu and US engineers building the levees, building the barriers, and fixing that kind of place which was going underwater big time before the hurricane struck. So I want to say that there is some disruption, not nearly enough, there's some innovation, and it's a struggle, a big struggle. And while we're on it, let me just say that my critique of Jeremy Corbyn is that his slogan is broadly, to the barricades, comrades, in gender-segregated railway carriages. If that's innovation, if that's progress, especially if you're on the left, I've got to get off that bus. So what we find is there are a lot of retrograde trends concerning innovation. Let me talk about them in this little speech, if you'll let me, and if I don't overrun. Well, let's have a tough definition, first of all, of what innovation is. If you take the paper with which Einstein revolutionized modern physics, I'm sure you know it from 1905, does the inertia of a body magic? If you're less light. Does the get good focus on this, Icky? Does the inertia of a body depend on its energy content? That's the front, that's the middle, and that's the end. 600 words, including a version of E equals mc squared. That was new. He stood on the shoulders of Newton and then he jumped on it. So innovation is not about a kind of Marshall McLuhan transferring about ideas from one industry to another, although that can be useful. It's got to be based on fundamental new insights that are really novel and are based on new knowledge. Anybody know who this is, Melody? All you marketing people, you're always quoting him and his pyramid, there's a clue. None of you have read him. Good, Maslow. Abraham Maslow, and his famous and unread article in the September 1943 issue of the Psychological Review, available on the internet. We're not just needy animals, ladies and gentlemen. We search for meaning. We explore because it's there. We are curious, but more than cats. We admire fish. They have schools of fish, but fish never made a school. I know this is deeply unpopular with fish rights activists. We've got something different, our humanity. And therefore, we are able to search for things and find things that we hadn't expected that are not just based on needs, but based on what we think the world should be. So we should track the needs of users. And you can even, as you suggest, I've turned my mind around about this because I think there has been some progress. You can co-create things with your clients and customers, as long as you have the last word. If you leave the last word to the market, to the user, as alpha and omega, you will just do focus groups, and Google never did that. You know, Peter Mandelson did it, but not Google. And even Bill Gates, I don't think, did it. So you listen to them, then you forget them a bit, you go your own way, and you also recognize that users have talents, not just needs. We didn't have the need for Google, it appeared 20 years ago. Now we have the talent to search. And as I've said, older people have a better talent than younger. So here's the Model T, any cliche you like, as long as it's a cliche. Here's the assembly line, so new product, new process. But there was also something else, wasn't there? New forms of organization with Model T Fords. We forget that. Ford made a whole network of dealers act on low interest credit, and the result was success. He organized that. So you get innovation for me with this type definition, which is not a Mars bar half an inch longer, or a new sub-brand, or something like that. It's innovation that does not believe that regulation is a force for innovation, but rather an impediment. Change in product, change in process, change in organization, and often, as in the case with the Model T, the three go together. That's a tight definition of innovation. It's not all about transferring things or anything like that. It is very much about what Regina talked about, the leitmotif of my speech, creativity. And that's not just post-it notes, folks. It's got to go a bit deeper. It's based on research. Okay, well, let me give you two illustrations of this. I write a bit about energy. Old John didn't mention my book, Energize. It's at the head of a list of books on Amazon called Energize Your Sex Life. It's got nothing to do with that. But let me give you an example. Europeans hope, the EU hopes, and that's different from Europe. I hope we realise that. Right? And I'm afraid our German Green friends hope that we can manage the demand for electricity and energy down. And the whole smart cities movement suggests you were stupid. I'm down here to suggest that you could cut your consumption if only I introduce some IT, then you won't have to travel so much. That doctrine's been going 40 years. I'm pretty pissed off about the same doctrine. When if you look at the Europe's recession, you look at these figures, yeah, you can see the Lehman Brothers crisis has brought down terawatt-hour consumption in the whole of EU a bit. We're missing the first digit there, but it's 3. Right? But if you look at what's happening, despite all the increase in services and the deindustrialization, despite all the improvements in energy efficiency, despite the recession, the demand has gone down from about 3,150 to about 3,050 terawatt hour. It's an appreciable drop, but it doesn't indicate at all that we can cut energy demand. It's just not going to happen. So we need to remember that we need much more energy, and IT can play a big part in that. We'll come to it. Not try to use the smart cities movement, where Obama has just announced a massive program for 100 American cities to go smart. His budget, $160 million. Do the math. Big deal. if we really look at the future of energy in the light of the oil price decline, why on earth would China not motorise in a thoroughly extensive fashion over the next 10 or 20 years? Why would India lower demand for energy when it's just building its high-speed train system? When the Siemens guys got down to see the old system, they nearly fainted, the number of people who had been put on it. So what we can say, and already Regina referred to urbanisation and so on, is we're getting urbanisation, infrastructure construction, motorisation, middle class, you know it all. So we're going to have rising demand for energy. Get hit to that. It's not going to be managed down. But we can do it because we've got more sunlight alone incident on the planet than we could possibly use if we had the PV efficiencies to begin to make it happen. And if the Sahara wasn't a disaster zone, not just for natural reasons, but for all the other ones with which you're familiar. The oil price decline has other roots. It's not to do with just supply and demand. Ingenuity is the important mediating force between supply and demand. And there are other factors. Another important force is financialization. And I'm afraid to say even Fujitsu is a victim of that. But if you look at what the endlessly anagrammable Fatih Birol, don't start just yet, says, the current shale oil and gas glut in the United States is going to swing back to a shortage in 5 or 10 years' time, mostly because of what ISIL and other people are doing around the Middle East. And where did that begin? I'll leave that to your imagination. So we need to be careful about believing either that there was peak oil or that we've got a total oil glut at the moment. There will be an oil price rebound, and we'll come to what IT has to do with all of this. But let me just say that in many ways we're not in the place that we would like to do the innovations in IT and in energy that we would like. If you look at the cash hoards, which I'm sure you know about, of American companies, Apple are the most notorious, 160 billion. They'd rather have it earning no interest, $160 billion of cash, than actually putting it in a laboratory. It's too risky to put it in a lab. Better have it in a bank doing nothing. And it's not just Apple, it's GE, it's Google, it's mobile companies, it's pharmaceutical companies, FMCG, you name it. So what are we doing in terms of innovation to make IT or anything else get closer to the tasks in hand? Well, how do we explain the oil price decline? Well, you could talk about the financialization of everything. Because you know when the giant sucking fish that is Goldman Sachs has stored 25% of the world's aluminium in Detroit, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. And it's not just the nasty banks, because as we just saw from the cash hoards, nearly everybody's a bank nowadays, of sorts. The priority is on finance more than innovation. And it's interesting, if you do go to the energy market, you'll see that the most junk bond intensive sector in American economy is energy. And now all the shale companies are catching a big cold because they've been so indebted. So energy is afflicted by financialization, so all the companies I showed before. That's going to lead to the price volatility that we've already seen, where it's overdone, down at $40 or $50, and it'll probably take it back up to 100 and more within the next 10 years. Is it to do with supply and demand? Not really. It's also to do with the fact that we're not innovating enough in energy and the IT related to it, but the people who are interceding are the financiers. It's not just me that's saying that. It's the old Dutch head of the International Energy Agency. She looks happy enough here, but she makes a good point here. If it was down by 16%, I could live with it. But it's down by 66%, energy R&D. And if you look at the top energy spenders, this is the percent of sales that they're spending on R&D, you can see that VW was all right, pretty good from a car point of view. Microsoft double that, Intel triple that. That's very revealing. Now come to the energy sector. Schlumberger is above the statutory 1%. But if you take Exxon, they're spending 0.2% of their sales revenues on R&D, thinking about the future. BP, 0.2%. Is that why Deepwater Horizon happened? Because they weren't thinking clearly enough about the future. If you go to Royal Mail, it's 0.1%, because there's nothing happening in Royal Mail. Is that why the postman looks so pissed off in the morning? Because there's no innovation there. There is innovation happening, let's be nuanced about it, and no doubt Korea Electric and companies like it will, having imported nuclear power, and now exporting it to the UAE and elsewhere, just like China is doing. They're moving ahead, like Osaka Gas. But generally you can see the figures in utilities, in energy generally, are weak. They need to spend, we all need to spend more on R&D. Not because it guarantees a result, Einstein already covered that. It's in the nature that you can't guarantee a result. But you know if you keep going on at 0.1, 0.2%, which graciously Fujitsu does not, then you're definitely going to get a result. Failure. So only sustained technological innovation, ladies and gentlemen, in and beyond IT can beat low prices. And we heard a bit about Amer, we've not heard much about the Middle East, but they got the message now. If you read the quote, they are spending more and more on innovation because they know that just black gold beneath the sand doesn't do it in the 21st century. But what do we hear from Harvard, ladies and gentlemen, in this rather dire situation that I've outlined? I thought we'd begin on an upbeat note. Well, what we hear is, you need a minimum viable innovation system, December issue. And it's great, this system. You don't have to do any work. You don't have to change anything about the way you organise. And you don't have to spend any money. That's wonderful. We can be guaranteed that innovation will improve in this way. So I want to say that in the real-time digital enterprise and in the Internet of Things, we've got some important tasks ahead. IT no longer simply models reality. Will be more integrated with reality. Are the models that we have from IT currently adequate to understand and interpret the Internet of Things? Because data alone doesn't interpret things. Find out by giving a big new role to experiments and prototypes. And I wonder how much of an experimental and prototype culture you have. I imagine it's very good. I imagine it can be better. And all you people in development but also take a step back and get closer to the people in research. I'll come back to that. We know it's tough in development, but it's clear that we need to be more ambitious than the current culture is suggesting. And in terms of your sales and marketing, you need to bond with them, you development engineers, as well as with the research people, but bond with the sales and marketing people to target and focus relentlessly on the R&D departments of your customers. Collaborate with them to believe that we can make a new world through human ingenuity and do it through a relentless culture of making mistakes. Now often people talk about making mistakes. Of course, nobody got promoted for making a mistake. But we need to get that much more into our risk-averse culture. He talked about making mistakes and not foretelling the results of R&D. And this man anticipated a big mistake. He wrote himself a little email for publication if it all went wrong. And it didn't. Just as well. The great thing about these mistakes is we can learn from them. And that's something we probably need to turn the volume up on in Fujitsu as elsewhere. More prototypes, more mistakes, more 3D modeled buildings, more iterations, more demonstrations. And in that same issue of the Harvard Business Review, may I commend to you this article, which is all about business experiments, could be lab experiments as well. Sweat them, abide by them, make sure they're reliable, build more of a culture of prototypes, pilots, and all that stuff. But let me say, before we all agree that innovation is speeding up, aversion to risk, people talk about it, they don't understand the force of it. The premonitions and the apprehensions we have of an ominous future. Engineers, even some of you, turn around to some people, and the finance people do as well, and say you can't do that. And the lawyers protect the status quo, and the regulators protect the status quo. And cash flow for small firms and shareholders for big ones tend to act as impediments to innovation. We have short-term vision. I got a whole passage on silos, which we can come back next year if you'll have me back ever. But a big barrier is risk consciousness. And I just thought maybe I'll end now by telling you how the British are pioneering the descent to the bottom with risk consciousness. If you look at the things that we like to ban in Britain, I don't want to ban it, but people do. Fossil fuels, nuclear, geothermal, tidal, high-speed rail, new roads, new housing, artificial intelligence. How can you ban something that doesn't exist? Antibiotics, culls of badgers, nanotechnology, fast food, genetically modified food, fizzy food, foie gras, sugar, hate speech, tabloids, lads' mags, the Dorchester Hotel, Israel, Russia, and a new entrant bubbling under, Hungary. Joseph, we'd like to ban you. Not me. And we don't want gambling, we don't want payday loaners or those people, plastic money, we don't want that. We've never been iller, because we've got all of these really horrible diseases coming around our door. Except, I don't know if you noticed, we've never been more Dutch, right? We've never been taller. They've got to redesign the Airbus for that. We never lived longer, right? But it doesn't matter, we can all have a panic. This is not an atmosphere that is conducive to innovation. If you engineers think that cultural matters, social matters, of no relevance to your everyday career, you'd be wrong. Because when you're at the cocktail party and you say, I've just installed a new Fujitsu IT system on the Chinese nuclear reactor at Hinkley Point, nobody's going to pour you another martini. And then you're going to, he's taking notes. Good man. We get a result. A word from our sponsors here. How am I doing? Melody, how am I doing? Half an hour have I done? 5 minutes? I need a lifetime. So, the significance of prototypes and experiments is precisely to convert uncertainty, Donald Rumsfeld's unknown unknowns, into quantifiable risk. That's what you've got to do. And I could make a string of jokes about Rumsfeld and unknown unknowns, but I won't do that. Let me say to conclude, I hope you got my @JamesWoodhouse, that's my Twitter handle. I'm expecting you to troll me, right? If you don't troll me, you've got no balls. So, slag me off, that's the way forward, because any French in the audience, there's a clue. Who's this? No French? What a pity. Impossible but terrific, the French. Well, this is Voltaire. The quote attributed to him, he didn't actually make it. You will know. I disagree with what you say. I'll defend to the death your right to say it. We've lost that in the West. Because the culture of offence, the culture of you can't do that, the culture of you can't say that, is really big and it's out there. So let's go forward in our innovation and in our R&D, and with Regina's creativity, and with Joseph's great faith that technology can solve the problems. Why? Because us humans, the superior ones, made it. We can work it out. We are ingenious. We are not animals. Let's go forward with that view, and the concomitant part of that is that a willingness to tolerate other people's horrible views does not mean you don't judge them. Let the idiots get up and speak and make their stupid prototypes, because that's the cause of free debate and intellectual combat, and why I want criticism and tomatoes and trolling, not just questions and answers. Now that doesn't mean we don't judge those idiots, right? And those silly prototypes and so on. The two attitudes are perfectly consistent with each other. Let them speak and form our mature adult judgments. That's what we need, and that's the way that you'll be truly distinguished engineers. Thank you so much.